The training ship Star Compass moved slowly through the dark space near the edge of the Kepler sector. Inside the ship, 12 young alien cadets sat at their learning stations while their human instructor, Jake Murphy, walked between them. The ship was not very big, but it had all the newest navigation tools that the Galactic Navigation Academy could buy. Jake looked at his students and smiled a little. They came from many different worlds and looked very different from each other. HFY was from the Vorthak people, and her skin looked like blue crystal that caught the light from the ship's panels. When she moved her head, the light would dance across her face in pretty patterns. Bloom was much different because she came from a plant world, and her green skin had small leaves growing from her arms and neck. She could make sweet smells when she was happy or bad smells when she was upset. Then there was Crit, who had big round eyes like an insect and could see many colors that humans could not see. His homeworld was full of others like him who worked together like bees in a hive. There were also cadets from the gas giant moons and the ice worlds, and even one from a world where everything was made of metal. All of these young aliens were very smart, and their homeworlds had sent them to learn how to guide ships between the stars. Their teachers back home had told them that the Academy was the best place to learn navigation in the whole galaxy. Most of their teachers were also aliens who used big quantum computers and neural links that connected right to their brains. Jake was different, though. He was the only human teacher at the Academy, and many of the other teachers thought his ways were too old and simple. While they used computers that could think faster than any living mind, Jake taught his students to use their eyes and their brains. The other teachers would shake their heads or make small sounds of doubt when they saw Jake teaching with old star maps printed on paper. Today was supposed to be an easy training mission. The cadets would practice using the ship's navigation systems to plot a course through some empty space where there were no dangers. The ship's computer would do most of the work, but the cadets needed to learn how to tell the computer what to do. Jake watched as HFY pressed buttons on her control panel. The quantum computer showed her a three-dimensional map of all the stars around them. She could see their ship as a small dot in the middle of the map, and she needed to pick a path to a practice target that was 2 light hours away. Bloom was working on the same problem, but her plant-like fingers moved much slower on the controls. She kept making small worried smells because the computer was very fast, and sometimes she could not keep up with all the information. It was showing her .kr it was doing better because his insect eyes could see the computer display in ways that others could not. He could see layers of information that were invisible to everyone else, and this made the navigation problems easier for him to solve. Jake had been teaching at the Academy for 6 months now, and he was starting to understand how different his students were from human students back on Earth. These young aliens had grown up with computers that could think and machines that could solve any problem in seconds. They had never needed to figure things out for themselves the way humans did. The Star Compass had the best navigation equipment in the Academy fleet. Its quantum computers could calculate jump routes through hyperspace in milliseconds. Its neural interface systems could connect directly to an alien's brain and show them the safest path through any star system. The ship even had backup systems. For the backup systems, so that nothing could ever go wrong, Jake sometimes tried to show his students how to navigate without all these computers, but they would look at him like he was crazy. Why would anyone want to do math in their head when a computer could do it 1,000,000 times faster? Why would anyone want to look at the stars with their eyes when sensors could see things that no living eye could ever see? The training exercise was going well when Jake noticed that the lights on the main navigation panel started to flicker. At first he thought it was just a small glitch that would fix itself in a few seconds. But then more lights started to flash, and some of the displays began to show strange symbols instead of star maps. HFY looked up from her station with worry in her crystal eyes. The sweet smell that Bloom made when she was happy changed to a sharp, sour smell that meant fear. Crit's compound eyes moved quickly as he tried to understand what his sensors were telling him. Then everything went dark. All the lights went out at once, and the only sound was the soft hum of the life support systems. Emergency lighting came on a few seconds later, but it was dim and red and made. Everything looked scary. Jake moved quickly to the main control panel and started pressing buttons, but nothing happened. The quantum computers were completely dead. The neural interface systems showed only blank screens. Even the backup navigation systems were not working. Outside the ship's windows, Jake could see a bright flash of light from a nearby star. It was a pulsar that had just released a huge burst of energy. The radiation from the star had hit their ship like an invisible wave and destroyed all their electronic systems. The cadets started to make sounds of fear. Some of them had never been in space without working computers. They did not know how to find their way home without the machines they had always trusted. Jake looked at the faces of his students and saw real terror there. They were lost in the endless dark of space with no way to call for help and no way to find their way back to safety. Their advanced alien technology had failed them when they needed it most, but Jake was not afraid. He had an idea that none of them would expect. Jake left the navigation room while his students sat in the dim red emergency lighting. The alien cadets whispered to each other in their different languages, but Jake could hear the fear in their voices even when he could not understand their words. Zexhia's crystal skin had lost its bright shine and now looked dull and gray. Bloom was making bitter smells that filled the air with the scent of rotting leaves. When Jake came back to the navigation room, he was carrying a large flat case made of old brown leather. The case looked very old and had scratches and worn spots from years of use. He set it down on the main navigation table and opened it carefully. Inside the case were things that made the alien cadets stare in confusion. There were sheets of white paper covered with black lines and small writing. There was also a strange metal tool that looked like it had gears and lenses and a small round object with a needle that pointed in one direction. Zex single quotes HAI leaned forward to look at the papers, but she could not understand what she was seeing. The lines looked like someone had drawn pictures of dots connected by straight lines. There were numbers written next to some of the dots and strange symbols that she had never seen before. Jake spread the papers out on the table so all the cadets could see them. The papers were star charts, but they were not like anything the aliens had ever used. These charts were drawn by hand and printed on real paper instead of being displayed on computer screens. "These belong to my grandfather," Jake said as he smoothed out one of the larger charts. He was a ship captain back on Earth before humans had quantum computers or neural interfaces. Bloom moved closer and her leaves rustled with curiosity. She had never seen navigation tools that were not electronic. "How can drawings on paper help us find our way through space?" she asked while making confused smells. Jake picked up the metal tool with the gears and lenses. "This is called a sextant," he said. "Humans used tools like this for hundreds of years to navigate across Earth's oceans and later through space." Crit's compound eyes focused on the sextant as Jake held it up to show them how it worked. "But Lieutenant Murphy," Crit said in his clicking voice, "our sensors can measure distances and angles much better than any mechanical device." "That's true," Jake said, "but your sensors don't work right now, and this sextant will work even if every computer in the galaxy stops working." Jake pointed to the round object with the needle. "This is a compass. It always points toward magnetic north no matter where you are. Humans learned to use the magnetic fields of planets and stars to find their direction long before we had electronic navigation." The alien cadets looked at each other with doubt in their eyes. These primitive human tools seemed so simple compared to the advanced technology they were used to. How could something made of metal and paper be better than quantum computers that could think faster than any living mind? Jake began to explain how the star charts worked. He showed them how each dot on the paper represented a real star that they could see outside their ship's windows. The lines between the dots showed how the stars looked from different positions in space. "Look here," Jake said, pointing to a group of dots on one of the charts. "This is the Corona star cluster. If we can find it outside our windows, we can figure out where we are." Zexhi studied the chart carefully. Her crystal eyes could see very fine details, and she noticed that there were small numbers written next to each star. "What do these numbers mean?" she asked. "Those numbers tell us how bright each star is and how far away it is from the others," Jake explained. "My grandfather measured all of these things by hand using just his eyes and this sextant." Jake showed them how to use the sextant to measure the angle between two stars. He held the tool up to his eye and looked through it at the stars outside the window. By turning the gears, he could measure exactly how many degrees apart the stars appeared to be. Bloom was amazed that such a simple tool could give them information about their position. "But how did your grandfather know which stars to look for?" she asked. Jake smiled and picked up another chart that was covered with his grandfather's handwriting. The old man had written notes all around the edges of the star map. Some notes warned about dangerous areas where solar radiation was strong. Other notes marked safe routes through asteroid fields or around black holes. "My grandfather traveled through this part of space many times," Jake said. "Every time he made the journey, he wrote down what he learned. He marked which stars were reliable landmarks and which ones changed their brightness over time." Crit was studying the handwritten notes with great interest. His insect mind was very good at finding patterns, and he could see that Jake's grandfather had created a system for remembering important navigation information. "Your ancestor did all of this without computer assistance?" Crit asked with wonder in his clicking voice. "Humans had to learn to navigate by ourselves," Jake said. "We didn't have the advanced technology that your species developed. So we learned to read the stars like a map and to trust our own eyes and minds." Jake began teaching them the basics of celestial navigation. He showed them how to identify different types of stars by their color and brightness. Red giant stars were old and very large. White dwarf stars were small but very hot. Blue stars were young and burned very bright. The alien cadets were surprised to learn that stars had personalities just like living things. Some stars were steady and reliable, while others changed their brightness in regular patterns. Some stars had planets around them, while others traveled alone through space. HFY was the first to understand how the system worked. Her crystal mind was very good at mathematics, and she could see how measuring angles between stars could tell them their exact position. "This is actually very clever," she said, with respect in her voice. Jake taught them about dead reckoning, which was a way to track their movement through space by keeping careful records of their speed and direction. Even without working computers, they could figure out how far they had traveled by watching how the stars moved across their windows. Bloom discovered that she could smell differences in the ship's air that told her which direction they were moving. Her plant senses could detect tiny changes in air pressure that happened when the ship changed course. As the hours passed, the alien cadets began to see the beauty in these ancient human methods. The star charts were not just tools for navigation, but also works of art that showed the wonder and mystery of space. Jake's grandfather had drawn the charts with love and care and had filled them with the wisdom he gained from years of traveling among the stars. By the end of their first lesson, the cadets were starting to feel hope again. They might be lost in space with broken computers, but they were not helpless. Jake had shown them that it was possible to find their way home using nothing but their eyes and their minds and the ancient wisdom that humans had learned long ago. Jake spread out more of his grandfather's star charts on the navigation table. The alien cadets gathered around him in the dim red emergency lighting and watched as he pointed to different sections of the hand-drawn maps. Each chart showed a different region of space and was covered with careful notes written in faded ink. "The first thing we need to do is figure out exactly where we are," Jake said as he looked out the ship's main window at the field of stars. "Then we can plot a course to the nearest space station or planet where we can get help." HFY studied the charts with her crystal eyes that could see very fine details. She noticed that some stars on the charts were marked with special symbols. "What do these marks mean?" she asked while pointing to a star that had a small circle around it. "Those are navigation stars," Jake explained. "My grandfather marked the stars that make the best landmarks because they are very bright and don't change their position relative to other stars." Jake picked up the sextant and showed Crit how to hold it properly. "Your compound eyes can see More colors than mine can, he said. That will help you identify different types of stars more easily than I can. Crit took the sextant carefully in his insect-like hands. The tool felt strange and primitive compared to the electronic sensors he was used to, but he could see how it worked. He held it up to his eye and looked through it at a bright blue star outside the window. I can see that this star has a very pure blue color, Crit said with excitement in his clicking voice. It's much bluer than it looks to your human eyes. That means it's a young hot star, Jake said while checking his grandfather's notes. Blue stars burn very bright, but they don't live very long. My grandfather wrote that blue stars are good navigation markers because they stand out from other stars. Bloom was studying a different chart that showed the area of space where they had been when their computers failed. Her plant-like fingers traced the lines that connected different star groups. These patterns look like the constellations that my people use to mark the seasons on our world, she said. That's exactly right, Jake said with a smile. Humans learned to see pictures in the star patterns just like your people did. We gave names to the star groups so we could remember them better. Jake pointed to a group of stars on the chart that formed the shape of a great bird with spread wings. My grandfather called this one the eagle because of how it looks. When the eagle constellation is directly overhead, you know you are in the outer rim of the Kepler sector. The cadets began to understand that navigation was not just about mathematics and measurements. It was also about learning to see patterns and remember landmarks. Just like finding your way through a forest or across a desert. Jake taught them how to use the ship's chronometer to keep track of time. Even though their computers were broken, the mechanical clock still worked perfectly. Time is very important for navigation, he explained. Stars move across the sky as our ship moves through space, so we need to know exactly when we make each measurement. Zexai was very good at mathematics, and she quickly learned how to calculate their position using the angles between stars. She would measure the angle between two navigation stars and then use the star charts to figure out where they must be located. This is amazing, she said as she worked through the calculations. We can pinpoint our exact location just by measuring angles and doing basic mathematics. Bloom discovered that her plant senses could help with navigation in unexpected ways. She could feel tiny vibrations in the ship's hull that told her which direction they were drifting. I can sense that we are moving toward the galactic center, she said while her leaves rustled with concentration. Jake was impressed by how quickly his students were learning. Your species have different abilities than humans do, he said. That makes you even better at this kind of navigation than my grandfather was. As they worked together to map their position, Jake told them stories about human exploration of space. He talked about the brave astronauts who first left Earth using nothing but mechanical instruments and paper charts. He described how human traders and explorers had mapped the nearby star systems one by one over hundreds of years. Humans didn't have faster-than-light travel when we started exploring space, Jake said. Every journey took years or even decades. The early explorers had to be very careful about navigation because one mistake could leave them lost forever. Crit was fascinated by these stories of human courage. Your people traveled to other stars even when it was so dangerous, he asked. Humans have always been explorers, Jake said. We left our home planet even before we knew if there was any place else in the universe where we could live. The alien cadets were beginning to understand something important about human nature. While their own species had developed advanced technology to make space travel safe and easy, humans had learned to be brave and resourceful. They had ventured into the unknown with primitive tools, and had survived by being clever and determined. After several hours of careful measurement and calculation, they finally determined their exact position. They were about 3 light days away from the nearest inhabited system, and they were drifting slowly toward a dangerous asteroid field. Jake studied the charts and found notes that his grandfather had written about this exact region of space. My grandfather came through here before, he said with relief in his voice. He marked a safe route through the asteroid field. The notes described landmarks to look for and warned about hidden Dangers like gravitational anomalies and unstable asteroids. Jake's grandfather had even drawn detailed maps of the safest paths through the most dangerous areas. Your grandfather was a very wise man, HFY said with respect. He thought about the people who would come after him and left them the information. They would need to be safe. Jake felt proud of his grandfather and grateful that the old man had kept such careful records. Without these hand-drawn charts and handwritten notes, they would have no way to navigate through the dangerous region ahead, but now they faced their biggest challenge yet. They had to guide their ship through a complex maze of spinning rocks and gravitational traps using nothing but their eyes and their grandfather's old charts. One mistake could destroy their ship and kill them all. Jake looked at his alien students and saw determination in their faces. They had learned to trust the ancient human methods of navigation, and they were ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. The asteroid field stretched out in front of their ship like a wall of spinning rocks and debris. Through the main window, the cadets could see thousands of asteroids tumbling slowly through space. Some were as small as houses, while others were as big as mountains. They moved in complex patterns that seemed to have no order or reason. Jake spread out his grandfather's most detailed charts on the navigation table. These charts showed the asteroid field from different angles and were covered with warnings written in red ink. His grandfather had marked safe corridors between the largest asteroids and had noted the gravitational forces that could pull a ship off course. The asteroids look like they move randomly, but they actually follow predictable patterns, Jake explained to his students. My grandfather spent weeks mapping their movements and figuring out the safest routes through the field. HFY studied the charts with her crystal eyes and tried to match the drawings to what she could see outside the window. How can we tell which asteroids are which? She asked. They all look the same to me. Jake pointed to a large asteroid that had a distinctive L-shaped crack running across its surface. My grandfather called that one Broken Tooth because of the way the crack looks. He used asteroids with unique features as landmarks to help him navigate. Crit pressed his compound eyes against the window and used his ability to see multiple light spectrums. I can see that some asteroids reflect light differently than others, he said with excitement. Some are made of metal while others are made of rock or ice. That's perfect, Jake said. Your eyes can see things that my grandfather could only guess at. You can help us identify the landmark asteroids more easily. Jake explained how gravitational forces worked in the asteroid field. Large asteroids pulled smaller ones toward them, while the rotation of the entire field created currents and eddies in space. Ships that didn't understand these forces could be pulled off course or crushed between colliding rocks. Look at this note, Jake said while pointing to his grandfather's handwriting. He wrote that every 6 hours the field rotates enough to change the safe corridors. We have to time our passage perfectly or we'll end up in a death trap. Bloom could feel vibrations through the ship's hull that told her about the gravitational forces around them. Her plant senses were very sensitive to the tiny changes in gravity that happened as they moved closer to large asteroids. I can feel the pull of that big asteroid over there, she said while pointing to a mountain-sized rock. It's trying to drag us toward it. Jake taught them how to use the gravitational forces to their advantage. Instead of fighting against the pull of large asteroids, they could use the gravity to slingshot around them and gain speed. This was called a gravity assist, and human space explorers had used the technique for centuries. We're going to thread the needle, Jake said as he traced their planned route on the chart. We'll let the big asteroids pull us along their gravity wells and then break free at just the right moment to follow the next corridor. The first part of their journey through the asteroid field went smoothly. Jake called out course corrections, while Crit spotted landmark asteroids and Bloom felt for gravitational changes. HFY did the mathematical calculations to keep them on the correct path. They passed by an asteroid that looked like a giant metal flower with petals, made of crystallized minerals. Jake's grandfather had called it Iron Blossom and had used it as a major navigation point. The cadets were amazed that the old man had been able to remember so many distinctive features. Your grandfather must have had an incredible memory, HFY said with admiration. He remembered the exact shape and position of hundreds of asteroids. Humans are very good at recognizing patterns and remembering landmarks, Jake said. We had to develop these skills to survive on our home planet before we had electronic maps. As they went deeper into the asteroid field, the navigation became more difficult. The asteroids were packed more closely together and they moved in faster and more complex patterns. Jake had to make split-second decisions about which corridor to follow and when to change course. KR had spotted a cluster of metal asteroids that were spinning around each other in a tight formation. "Those asteroids are locked in a gravitational dance," he said. "They'll keep spinning like that for thousands of years." Jake checked his grandfather's notes and found a warning about that exact formation. "My grandfather wrote that those spinning asteroids create a gravitational whirlpool. Ships that get too close can be trapped and pulled in." They had to make a dangerous detour around the spinning asteroids, which put them behind schedule. Jake calculated that they would reach the next major corridor just as it was closing due to the rotation of the asteroid field. "We have to take a risk," Jake said while studying the charts. "There's a shortcut through a narrow gap, but it's only safe for a few minutes every 6 hours. The gap was between two house-sized asteroids that were slowly moving toward each other. In a few minutes, they would collide and block the passage completely. Any ship caught in the gap when the asteroids hit would be crushed instantly." Jake guided their ship toward the narrow opening, while his students watched with nervous excitement. The gap looked impossibly small, and the asteroids seemed to be moving much faster than they had appeared from a distance. "I can see metal debris floating in the gap," Crit said with worry in his voice. "Other ships have tried to make this passage and didn't make it. We're going to make it," Jake said with confidence. "My grandfather made this same passage 12 times, and he wrote down exactly how to do it safely." Bloom could feel the gravitational forces of the two asteroids pulling at their ship from both sides. "They're trying to grab us," she said while her leaves rustled with fear. Jake waited until the last possible second and then fired the ship's thrusters at maximum power. They shot through the gap just as the two asteroids crashed together behind them with tremendous force. The collision sent shock waves through space that rocked their ship, but they were already clear and safe. "That was incredible," HFY said, while her crystal skin glowed with excitement. "We just did something that would have been impossible with computer navigation." "Why impossible?" Jake asked. "Because computers always choose the safest route," she explained. "They would never risk a passage like that even if it was the only way to survive." Jake smiled as he realized what she meant. But humans learn to take calculated risks when necessary. Sometimes the dangerous path is the only path that leads to safety. The alien cadets were beginning to understand that human navigation was not just about mathematics and measurements. It was also about courage and intuition and the willingness to make difficult decisions under pressure. They had successfully navigated through the most dangerous part of the asteroid field using nothing but their grandfather's hand-drawn charts and their own senses. Now they could see clear space ahead and the distant lights of Proxima Station where they would find safety and help. 3 days after they had escaped from the asteroid field, the training ship, Star Compass, finally reached Proxima Station. The massive space station hung in orbit around a red dwarf star, and its lights looked like a beautiful jewel against the darkness of space. The alien cadets pressed their faces to the windows and felt overwhelming relief to see civilization again. The station's traffic controllers were shocked when they received the Star Compass communication request. They had listed the training ship as lost with all hands after it had missed 3 scheduled check-ins. No one had expected to see the cadets and their human instructor alive. "Star Compass, this is Proxima Control," came the voice over the communication system. "We show your navigation systems as completely offline. How did you reach our station without quantum guidance?" Jake picked up the microphone and smiled at his alien students before answering. "Proxima Control, this is Lieutenant Murphy. Aboard Star Compass. We navigated here using traditional celestial navigation methods. All crew and cadets are safe and accounted for." There was a long pause before the controller responded. Did you say traditional navigation? Please confirm that you crossed the Kepler asteroid field using manual guidance. Confirmed, Jake said. We used star charts and mechanical instruments to plot our course. My students performed exceptionally well under difficult circumstances. Word of their survival spread quickly through Proxima Station and then to the Galactic Navigation Academy. The story seemed impossible to most people who heard it. How could anyone navigate through one of the most dangerous regions of space using primitive tools that were hundreds of years old? When they docked at the station, crowds of aliens gathered to see the ship that had made the impossible journey. News reporters wanted to interview Jake and his students about their adventure. Scientists wanted to examine his grandfather's star charts to understand how such simple tools could be so effective. Admiral Kethver, the commander of the Navigation Academy, arrived at Proxima Station within hours of hearing the news. The tall crystalline Vorthak leader had always been polite to Jake, but had never shown much respect for human navigation methods. Now he stood in the star compass navigation room and stared at the hand-drawn charts with amazement. Lieutenant Murphy, the Admiral said in his deep, resonating voice, I owe you and your students a profound apology. I have been a fool to dismiss the value of your traditional methods. Zexai stepped forward to speak for her fellow cadets. Admiral Keffer, with respect, the lieutenant saved our lives by teaching us to see the universe as humans do. We learned that technology is a tool, but wisdom comes from understanding the natural forces that shape space. The Admiral examined the sextant and compass that Jake had used to navigate. These instruments are so simple, yet they accomplished what our most advanced computers could not. How is this possible? Because they don't depend on electronics or quantum processors, Jake explained. Stars and gravity and magnetic fields are natural forces that have existed since the beginning of the universe. These tools let us measure and use those forces directly. Crit showed the Admiral how he had learned to identify different types of stars using his compound eyes. Lieutenant Murphy taught us that every star has its own personality, he said. Some are reliable navigation markers, while others change their brightness in patterns we can predict. Bloom demonstrated how she could feel gravitational forces through her plant senses. I learned to feel the pull of large objects like asteroids and planets, she explained. This helped us navigate through the asteroid field when we couldn't use sensors. The Admiral was deeply impressed by what the cadets had learned. You have all gained skills that most Academy graduates never develop, he said. You can navigate by understanding the universe itself rather than just reading computer displays. Within days of their return, the Academy announced major changes to its curriculum. Traditional navigation methods would now be taught alongside quantum navigation systems. All cadets would learn to use mechanical instruments and paper charts as backup methods for emergency situations. Jake's grandfather's star charts were carefully preserved and copied for the Academy archives. Teams of scholars studied the old man's handwritten notes and were amazed by the depth of knowledge they contained. The charts showed not just star positions but also information about gravitational anomalies, solar radiation patterns, and safe routes through dangerous regions. The Academy also ordered new mechanical navigation instruments to be manufactured for all their training ships. Sextants, compasses, and chronometers became standard emergency equipment alongside the quantum computers and neural interfaces. Jake was promoted to senior navigation instructor and was asked to develop new courses in traditional navigation methods. Students from across the galaxy requested to study under the human teacher, who had proven that ancient wisdom could be just as valuable as advanced technology. The alien cadets who had survived the adventure became heroes at the Academy. Zexai wrote a detailed report about their experience that was required reading for all navigation students. Crit developed new techniques for using biological senses to supplement mechanical navigation tools. Bloom created a guide for recognizing natural phenomena that could affect ship navigation. Most importantly, the Academy established the Murphy Navigation Prize to be awarded each year to the student who showed the best understanding of traditional navigation principles. The prize included a replica of Jake's grandfather's sextant and a copy of his hand-drawn star charts. At the award ceremony for the first Murphy Navigation Prize, Admiral Kethver gave a speech that was broadcast to every Academy campus in the galaxy. "We have learned that progress is not about abandoning the past, but about building upon the wisdom of those who came before us," he said. "Lieutenant Murphy and his students have shown us that sometimes the oldest methods are the most reliable." Jake stood with his former students and felt proud of how far they had come. They had started as young aliens who depended completely on advanced technology and had become skilled navigators who could find their way through space using nothing but their eyes and their minds. "The stars have been humanity's guides for thousands of years," Jake said during his acceptance speech. "We learned to read them like a map and to trust them like old friends. Technology can fail and computers can break, but the stars will always be there to show us the way home." In the months that followed, human navigation instructors were requested at academies throughout the galaxy. The techniques that had once been dismissed as primitive were now recognized as essential skills for any serious navigator. Physical star charts became prized possessions, and mechanical instruments were treated with the same respect as quantum computers. The story of the alien cadets, who were lost in space until a human pulled out ancient Earth charts, became a legend that was told throughout the galaxy. It reminded everyone that wisdom could be found in unexpected places and that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most elegant. Jake continued to teach at the academy for many years and trained thousands of students in the art of celestial navigation. He always began his classes by telling them about his grandfather and the hand-drawn charts that had saved their lives. "Remember," he would say, "the universe is vast and full of wonders, but it follows natural laws that any intelligent being can learn to understand. Trust in those laws, trust in your own abilities, and the stars will always guide you safely home."